Okay, I sent you the list. I thought I'd just go over the list item by item, just talking about it. And if you watch the first part of the video, probably the first half, you will see a lot of these items that I pointed out in the video, but this is going to be redundant, but it's going to put a price on each one. So I broke it up in A, B, C, and I call the other one kind of informational stuff. But A is the sort of basic mechanical. That's kind of the, I think you should do type of stuff so it works correctly. B is to improve the mechanical. Things that you can do. You could drive it with this undone. For instance, a small oil leak or something. But it's nice to do to make the car more whole. 3 I labeled as loosely as cosmetic or sort of nice to do type of stuff. So let's just walk through the items and the price. So automatic choke system missing. That's the bimetallic coil that is on the head, that then is connected to a rod that goes up through your head and into the top of your engine bay, or your engine bay area, and connects to your carburetor and operates the automatic choke. So that system is just missing. Actually, I didn't look down below and see if the bimetallic coil was there. Either whether it's there or it's not there. I mean, the parts are not much more. I'm assuming the labor. So parts would be, if nothing exists, then parts are about $50, and labor is about $100. Fuel gauge not working. I'm not absolutely sure this is not working because he wasn't absolutely sure how much fuel he had in there, but it was on empty. He thought he had 35 gallons. If so, it should have been off empty. It looked new. The sending unit looked new down below. It was completely not a bit of rust on it. But assuming you need a new sending unit, it's $90. Takes about an hour or so to put in, so it's $80. Horn not working. It didn't work. It had it wasn't solid. It had the give in it that's supposed to. It just didn't actuate. So I don't know what's wrong with it, but it could be the wire is disconnected, or it could be the horn itself, or there's a relay, I believe, also, at least in the early model. So I'd have to just troubleshoot that one. Left inside headlight is out. No doubt it's the headlight itself. The light's about 20, although you mentioned putting in LED lights, I think, so maybe you would just want to wait for that, because both 3 of the 4 headlights are working. But if you wanted me to stick a headlight in so all 4 is working, it'd be about $40. Left, right primary carburetor rebuild. These are the primary carburetors. Parts are about 50. A couple hours of labor to rebuild those. Secondary carburetors are a little simpler, a little faster. 35 in parts and 100 in labor. So all 4 carburetors rebuilt, so you just know they're all good. As what, 350 plus about $400. Brake inspection, flush bleed system. This would include taking the wheels off. It looks like they were done when you just look at the outside of them. The brake hoses look fairly new. There's no dirt on them, and they're shiny, so they've been replaced fairly recently, or at least the last time the car was serviced. But assuming there's no problems with the brake system, bleed all the old .3 brake fluid out of there. That's a $15. That's just brake fluid, basically. And then it'd take me a couple hours to bleed it all. Also, what I would do in there is I would make sure all of the pistons on the wheel cylinders are moving freely, because those can tend, if the car's been sitting a long time, those tend to bind up, and then you only got part of your system working. A little missing throttle spring, $8 part, 5 minutes to put it on. So the things that I would say before I would drive the car, I didn't include tires in this, but that's something you'll do. But the things to make the car sort of whole from a driving, and having, we'll see how much fuel you have in there, and having a working horn, so on and so forth. That's about $873. That doesn't include the troubleshoot of the horn, but I don't think that'd be too difficult. Now we get into sort of the improve. The mechanical is not as it should be, but sort of to improve the mechanical and make it whole, but not necessarily to operate the car as it should and safely. That's kind of this stuff. Would be, you got the missing back hot air doors, rods, baffles, whip. I need to look at the parts on that. I kind of missed that. But they're not terribly expensive. Let's say it's probably $50 to $100 in parts, and probably about $45, $50 to put it in. So it's not a big number, but it really doesn't need those. I mean, that, I guess in the colder climates up there or in Missouri in the winter, the reason that whole system exists with the rods and the baffles. I'm calling the baffles the butyl alcohol-filled accordion things that expand and contract and fail that we talked about on the phone today. You know, that helps the engine warm up faster because those louvers stay shut, and so that's for cold climate. It will run a little cooler with this off. It'll run a lot cooler, 22 degrees, with taking the actual shroud on the bottom on either side off. So that's kind of a questionable thing. You don't need it, but it does heat the engine up a little faster, although it doesn't get terribly cold in Missouri. Not like Chicago, I don't think, but anyway, it does get cold. So, little thing, back license plate light is out. It's probably just a bulb. Temperature gauge is not working. I did not get a chance, or actually more accurately, I forgot to check if the thermistor is in that left head. Just need to look down where the hot air comes out, and you should be able to see the thermistor. If there's no thermistor, it's just gone, or it's not working, then I think the thermistor it's not made, you can only get it used. I think it's around $200 from Clark. So that thermistor is kind of expensive. It could just be that the wire's not hooked up, but I'd have to troubleshoot it to see. Pressure gauge not working. I did see a new thin pressure line, evidence of that running from the engine back up front. Maybe it's just not hooked up. Not sure. I'd have to troubleshoot it. Alternator, pulley/fan bearing. When you rotate the pulley there, where the fan is connected, it does sound I've heard worse, but it's not quiet. Let's put it that way. It's a little rough. I wouldn't expect it would fail anytime soon. It might work for years just fine. But if you're going to get a rebuilt alternator, it's about $150. It doesn't take very long. It's just a couple wires and two bolts. So you can have it out and back in 30 minutes. But if you just want to have a little assurance, but it's pretty low priority. Meaning I think it'd be a long time before it fails. Now let's talk about the leaks and the compression. They kind of go together. You got really 3 points where you see when you put a piece of cardboard down after you get the engine warm. 3 spots, kind of back. I'm going to call them back right, back left, and sort of center. 3 distinct spots. I'm guessing, it's just kind of an educated guess here, but possibly the 120 compression in cylinder number 1 and the leak on the back right. I think there's a good likelihood those two are connected, and that they're the head gasket, which would involve taking that head off. Head gasket's not probably, I just guessed there, but it's not more than $20. But taking the head off, putting it on, and the whole valve train and everything, it's a day. It's a good day work before you've got it all working and you got the valve set. So that's a big number there if you wanted to deal with that. I don't think 120 compression is a big deal. I don't think the leak is a big deal. Now, if it is a head gasket that's leaking for whatever reason, which it could be that just the head bolts are loose. It's possible. Something to check. That'd be real fast, obviously, to correct. But I'm just kind of putting sort of worst case there with that. Small oil leak left back. Possibly just the oil pan gasket. Possibly, $15 gasket. Half an hour to replace it. Probably a good time to change the oil and put new oil in there, and put the zinc phosphorus additive oil in there. I like to use VR1, Valvoline VR1, because it's readily available at most stores. And that would be a little more. I think the oil's about $30. Oil's an additional $30, and then you got, to replace the filter. I think that's about $15. So sort of double that right there. Small leak, middle. So that's in the sort of the middle of the engine, if you will. And I didn't spend a lot of time trying to pinpoint it exactly. I mean, it's possible that it could be, again, the oil pan gasket, but I think that's fairly wishful thinking. I think more than likely it's that front crank shaft seal, and that's dropping the engine. That's where that big number comes from, 500, and the seal, and that's that sleeve that I talked about, where you put the sleeve, which makes the OD of the crank shaft about 20 thousandths bigger. It compresses the kind of rubber or whatever that material is on the seal, and takes care of that leak. It's usually not a big leak, but they are kind of hard. So anyway, the sort of nice to do, make it more whole. That's the B things. That comes out to 238 plus 1065. Now there's a couple troubleshoots in there on the pressure and temperature gauges that are unknowns, but I think that's close to worst case there. That's a total of 1,300. So now we're Now we're getting a little over 2,000, about 2,100 between the and the mechanical stuff. And that's about what I had just sort of quickly guessed when we were on the phone. I think I might have. At least I was thinking it in my mind, whether I said it out loud. But here's some other. I'll call them. We'll call C cosmetic, sort of nice to do stuff. The fuel door is the original paint for some reason. I guess they probably took it off when they painted the car and forgot to paint it. And I don't know if they didn't have their paint gun or something, but they put the original fuel door back on with the original paint. So that's a little bit of paint, having the paint matched, and then by the time you take it off, sand it, spray it, put it back on, color sand it, it's an hour of work. Dash clock not working. Yeah, not a big deal. I'm just sort of guessing that a dash clock that works is 50. It's usually about what Jeff seems to charge for things like that. Probably take an hour before you take it all apart, put the clock in there, put it back. Signal and bright indicator lenses. Those are the lenses that are sort of, when you put your signal on, you see it blinking to the left, to the right, and then there's a center light that when you hit your dimmer switch, your foot switch, it comes on with the brights. Before, I'd probably do that at the same time I did the clock, if we did that, and it's an hour of work, an hour and 20 minutes of work, and that. So front bumper, if you want to improve the front bumper, some of the chrome's coming off. Jeff at California Corvair sells new bumpers. Not new, but they look new. They're refurbished. All the dents are taken out. They look perfect, pretty much. They're old bumpers that have been refurbished and re-chromed for $260. The back bumpers, it's pitting a bit. So, if you want to improve the bumpers, it takes me half an hour or so to take them off, put them back on. That's a nice cosmetic thing. And then the painted front headlight bezels. I didn't get a price on that. You can get used ones that are sometimes decent chrome. And I think Jeff sells those at California Corvair for about 30. I think he does re-chromed ones for somewhere around 60 a piece. So let's say 120 there, and 10 minutes to put them on. So maybe $130 for that. I'll add that in there. Now here's some just informational things. See, on that car, and I've seen this before, the primary carburetors. They've got a couple of early model primary carburetors used as secondary carburetors. At least the top part is. It's a little harder for me to see the bottom part. That's not ideal, but it works. That's why I've kind of put it as informational. It's just things to be aware of if you buy the car. There's a wrong oil fill tube cap, no big deal, but someone put aftermarket one on there on the oil tube fill pipe. This is interesting. There's a non-standard, it looks like a 1960 distributor with sort of looks like an early type of electronic ignition. So it's not the standard Petronix electrician plate that most people use. It's about $100, and the 330 distributor. The car runs well, and it is an electronic ignition, so it's just something to be aware of. Someday, I don't know how good those distributors are, the electronic distributors, but whatever's on there, but maybe it'll last forever like other electronic. But it's something to be aware of. I wanted to point that out. Just a little thing. Allen, when they put the engine back together, the bolts that have 9/16 heads that go around the shroud they probably thought it was a good thing, but they use Allen head bolts. I think it's a little cheesy. I would replace those with the correct stock bolts. So there's no prices on these. They're just sort of, like I said, informational. And let me add this up real quick. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This amounts to about 9. Let's just say about 1,000 here. So if you wanted to get crazy, you could spend about $3,000, roughly 1,000 in things I would do before I drove the car much. Another 1,000 or 1,300 in making it more whole mechanically, and then some cosmetic stuff, roughly 1,000. And then someday, if you wanted to do some of this stuff, you could. But I don't think any of this stuff is necessary. But I did want to point it out. So hopefully this explains it to you. Okay, let's take a look up here. The engine was rebuilt a couple thousand miles ago, according to the owner, and it appears that way. At least they spray painted that. The gearbox is very tight. It's got new bolts on the gearbox. That is a 66 gearbox. You can tell from the 1, 2, 3 bolts. There's 6 bolts total. That's the Saginaw. That looks new. The rubber there is new. The rubber there is new. Those transmission mounts look new. New as whatever 5 years ago, whenever he had it redone. Even the cross member underneath them looks painted. So that rubber there is new. Forgive me, I don't know exactly what the name of that is. Let's look over here. That looks to be not ever replaced with the control arm that goes across there. It's got a aftermarket oil pan, which is nice for cooling. Let's take a look at the shocks. It's got dual exhaust, which all of them should, but that exhaust looks new. Let's look down here. They took the time to, this is the line for the pressure gauge. However, the pressure gauge doesn't seem to be reacting. We'll get on the front in a second. This is the back of it. A couple little plastic pieces that are missing. I think it's plastic. It might be metal that goes on the other side, but that's a concern if you're in rain, because that's the underside of the carpet, I think. So it's a small thing that's missing. Otherwise, you don't see any rust through on the bottom. The bottom looks excellent. It's dirty, but it looks excellent as far as the rust goes. Okay, let's look at the front of the car. You know, all the front rubber is replaced. He didn't have much gas in there, so I'm not sure if the gas gauge worked, but he's got a new sending unit. He's got a new gas tank. This rubber is for the what do they call that arm? The anti-sway bar, I think. Rubber's new. Let's look over here at the steering arm. That all looks like it was redone. That was all redone. That's expensive stuff. Like I said, a new gas. It looks like this whole front, that's all painted. And it looks like it's more than just sprayed from below. I think they probably removed this. Shocks are newer. That's all new. It really looks nice. The brake hose here is under 10 years old. That's new looking. Let's look over there. It looks pretty good. Pretty darn good under here. Let's take another look here at the floor pans. No, they're completely zero rust through on them. And it's possible that there's rust through on the rocker panels, but I sort of doubt it from looking at all the rest of the car. So I think that concludes our inspection.